people say that even the disaster in Saturday was aimed at blocking the way for the triangular political deal between America, the United States, Saudi Arabia, and Israel. And this triangular deal is delayed for the foreseeable future. It can deteriorate into two fronts, into both clash in Gaza, at the same time with the Hezbollah, and I do not recommend it to the other side. We are not,
Mr. Barak, we're almost out of time, but isn't the simple truth, just very briefly, that Israel has contemplated living without a peace with the Palestinians, of turning the Palestinians somehow into a sideshow and making peace with all the other Arabs? It is quite clear now that won't work. And to be honest with you, you in your heart of hearts have surely known for a long time that won't work.
Okay, so it's a great mistake of the present government and in a way of the right, political mistake of the right wing in Israel. But as I mentioned, it's not the issue right now. This dispute will have to be decided after this effort to paralyze the Hamas had been successful, and I still stick to everything that I believed in. I'm confident that we will have at the end. It might take a long time. It's not practical immediately. When I left Camp David that you have mentioned, I said 5, 15 or 50 years. When the time comes to have a agreement, it will be about two-state solution. It's about keeping 80% of the settlers within several percent of the whole area and having an independent Israel, well secure with all its strategic assets side by side with a demilitarized, a viable Palestinian state. That's the vision. It's not actual. It's not our job now. And when it becomes practical, I will be ready to give you another interview.
All right. Ehud Barak, we need to leave it there. Thank you.
Business Daily is coming up, and in 20 minutes, it's Witness History.
We're going back to India in 2013 to a landmark court victory for thousands of acid attack victims, and we'll meet the woman who helped make that change happen.
Then at 8:30 GMT, Science in Action.
5 strong earthquakes have struck the western Afghan city of Herat this week after centuries of seismic silence. Over 2,000 are dead. And I've been hearing why the region's geologic past made this a good place to live and farm, as well as a hazardous one.
That's followed by The Real Story.
Connecting Asia, Europe, Africa through infrastructure is the stated aim of China's Belt and Road Initiative. Beijing is celebrating the benefits for the many countries who received investment or borrowed it. So why does the Italian government now say joining was an atrocious mistake?
With news every half hour, this is the BBC World Service.
Up on Business Daily, we meet Tureen Shehnaz, CEO and founder of Impact Investment Exchange. She tells me about being the first Bangladeshi woman on Wall Street in the 1980s and how that inspired her to make finance be a force for good. That's all with me, Devina Gupta, after the latest world news.
BBC News with Moira Alderson. The Israeli military has told the entire population in the north of the Gaza Strip to move for their own safety. More than 1 million Palestinians, including all those living in Gaza City, are affected. Israel has deployed tanks on Gaza's boundaries as it prepares for a possible ground offensive in response to Saturday's wave of killings and hostage-taking by Hamas. The United Nations says it's impossible for Palestinians to comply in full with the Israeli order within the 24 hours allowed. It's urged Israel to protect all civilians in its shelters. The UN has moved its main operations centre. Hamas described the Israeli instruction as psychological warfare. The US Secretary of State is in Jordan on the next stage of a Middle East tour. Antony Blinken arrived in Amman for meetings with King Abdullah and the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas. He's trying to ensure that the conflict doesn't spread. In other news, the World Trade Organization has warned of a permanent rise in global prices because of growing barriers to trade. The head of the organisation told the BBC that more trade was now going on within regional trade blocs than between them. British regulators have approved Microsoft's revised offer to buy the maker of Call of Duty, Activision Blizzard. They originally blocked the $69 billion deal. It's the biggest in gaming history. South Korean officials say China has forcibly returned a large number of North Korean escapees. It follows reports in recent days by rights groups that as many as 600 defectors have been sent back to North Korea. They face possible imprisonment or execution. The Japanese government has applied at a court in Tokyo for an order to dissolve the Unification Church. It would mean the controversial sect being deregistered as a religious organisation and losing tax benefits. BBC News.
Hello and namaste. I'm Divina Gupta. Business Daily on BBC World Service. This is where we bring you in-depth interviews with people in business from across the globe. Today on the program, I'm speaking to Durreen Shehnaz. She's the founder and CEO of Singapore-based Impact Investment Exchange. Her company has raised millions of dollars for women-led startups and aims to create equitable financial system for all.
I think globally we also kind of create heroes out of people that maybe shouldn't be heroes. You know, folks like Elon Musk, folks basically are calling the shots. Everyone is sort of thinking what these people are doing are the right thing.
She went from Bangladesh to Wall Street and back again and didn't lose sight of her roots along the way.
You know, I actually bought pickles and love to eat pickles.
Dow Jones Industrial Average opened way down this morning, kept dropping, leveled off a bit, and is now headed down again.
Today we show that the quality stocks of America will always come to the top, and junk is junk.
Wall Street in the 1980s. It was an era when greed was good, as Gordon Gekko had famously said in the film Wall Street, released around the same time. And you've probably got an idea in your head of what the people working there looked like. And you'd be right if you're imagining more tailored suits than saris. Well, Durreen Shehnaz arrived there in 1989 as the first Bangladeshi woman and changed all that.
For the first time I learned how to wear stockings. And I grew up in a family with women wearing saris, and I came to college, I just wore jeans, and then all of a sudden I had to wear skirts. And so I always said there was just so many layers of learning.
What she saw and learned there have shaped her working life, and especially her attitude towards money and investments and who they work for. We'll hear more about that later in the program. But first of all, how did she end up in the lion's den, as she describes it? Let's start at the beginning. A million miles from Wall Street, Durreen grew up in Bangladesh of the 1960s, which was then known as East Pakistan. A separatist uprising turned into an armed conflict with Pakistan, leading to creation of Bangladesh in 1971. Durreen remembers this.
I was born, of course, before the war, so my first memories are of the war. For your audience as well, this was in 1971 when Bangladesh was born from the war with Pakistan. And it was a very bloody war. It went on for 9 months. 3 million people were killed. Hundreds of thousands of women were taken to the rape camps. So for me, as a child of 3 years old, just to sort of absorbing all that, I feel was quite intense, although I didn't really understand most of the time what was going on. But what I did see was my mother, who was a very strong figure in terms of keeping the family together, in terms of keeping my cousins alive and not be taken away to the camps. All those really stayed with me. You know, just sort of watching how women always pull everything together to keep the family and the society together in times of crisis. For me, growing up post-war, when I started school and, you know, really sort of growing up in a society which was being put together piece by piece, it was really remarkable.
What was your relationship like with money in that time?
You know, I grew up in a middle-class family, and I always say this with a caveat, you know, middle class in the 1970s in post-war country, actually it's very poor in anywhere else. But then still, I think for us, you know, we had little to share, but didn't really feel like we were missing a lot. But I think what it was money was one of those things where we were raised to always think that whatever we had to share. So I think that was a big thing for us. But at the same time, I think it's very interesting. You know, people often ask me, I've been a serial entrepreneur, like, oh my God, so did you have that lemonade stand growing up? You know, the typical American, the story that you hear. And for me, I didn't even know what an entrepreneur was. For me, it was just something very natural because I realized that I could actually trade stamps and make money from it, and I actually started having pen friends overseas just so that I could get stamps. And then when I was caught doing it, because I wanted to have some pocket money, when I was caught doing it, my mom took my collection away, and I remember I had some very rare stamps there, and I even seeded my friends to start their own collection so I could actually trade with them.
What did you buy from that money?
You know, I actually bought pickles and love to eat pickles.
Well, you know what a profit is. You got
Yes, I knew what a profit is.
Capitalism
Exactly. I knew what made me happy, and that was pickles.
Many jars of pickles later, Doreen packed her bags and moved to the US. After studying, she started a job on Wall Street and defied a lot of stereotypes.
I did walk into sort of a lion's den in terms of 1989. You can imagine so few women of color, and almost no one from our parts of the world. So I do remember it was quite a shock. I always joke that, you know, it was quite something for me at that point to learn about finance, to learn about how to operate in a very white male situation, but also even learning how to have the ability to operate in that culture. I mean, for the first time I learned how to wear stockings. You know, I grew up in a family with women wearing saris, and I came to college, I just wore jeans, and then all of a sudden I had to wear skirts, and so I always say there was just so many layers of learning.
Only Bangladeshi woman on Wall Street, only also a woman who's representing a heritage, trying to grapple with this new world, a woman of color as well. Did you face gender discrimination at that time with people that you dealt with?
Yes, absolutely. You know, in terms of challenges, I mean, I do think it's deeply ingrained, and there's the unconscious bias, you know, that there's there in the system, and it has been there for so long, and frankly, it is still there. Having presumptions about how certain people are, for example, saying, oh, you know what, you can't be in this deal because, you know, you actually don't understand how the oil market works. And then fast forward 1999, you know, when I actually had my first company in New York, and I went out to raise capital in Silicon Valley. I mean, I had a resounding zero result. Like, I couldn't raise a single cent, and I had to get the money eventually from, you know, various other sources. And I think the takeaway for me was one all over again, that, oh my God, I have all these credentials, but still I can't break the barriers. But today, if you look at the numbers are still so sad. I mean, less than 2% of women, and even less, you know, women of color who are getting capital from the VCs.
Doreen was brought up in a very socialist climate in her country, and says they even read Mao's Little Red Book, which influenced her just as much as her experience in the US. When she moved to America, she took her political activism with her and saw it as a country in which she could have an impact. Witnessing the 1987 financial crash convinced her of the inadequacies of the global financial system, and later on inspired her to try and do something about it. She decided to go back to her roots and work with the Grameen Bank in Bangladesh. It was a small entity then, giving loans on easy terms to poor women. Later, its founder, Muhammad Yunus, won a Nobel Peace Prize for it.
For me, that really was a big move, and going into Wall Street and really kind of learning how the system works. And for me, really, it was really being able to sort of see that how do I grasp the power of a system that frankly impacts the entire planet. And I think for me, I really felt sincerely the fact that the underserved and the 99%, they deserve a right to be a part of a financial system. And it's not just a matter of altruism, it's a matter of actually social and human justice.
Is this also a reflection of what is wrong in our financial system as a whole? Do you think it needs correction?
I think globally we also kind of create heroes out of people that maybe shouldn't be heroes. You know, folks like Elon Musk, folks who basically are calling the shots there. Everyone is sort of thinking what these people are doing are the right thing. I think we are not pausing and looking around and kind of saying, okay, once again, you know, what does it mean to be a hero? A hero is actually someone who is thinking of their community and being able to build it. Where the change is needed, I think the first and foremost is in our mindset. Instead of saying no, you know, if I have money, I'm not just going to put it in the private equity funds, and they're the ones who can actually just create the right thing for the financial system.
Doreen was convinced that the model of capitalism can be used for social good. So she started her own company. One of her big ideas was to launch Women's Livelihood Fund. It was a financial product which aimed to raise money for women-led enterprises. But in a bitter irony, when Doreen went for meetings to pitch this to investors and bankers, she faced gender bias.
They don't want to hear it from a woman, but also not only that, it was very interesting when we called it the Women's Livelihood Bond, and we were told by the bankers that it will never sell. It will only sell if we call it a high yield bond. And I said, I'm not going to change the name, and they said, then we can't sell it. Then my husband and I, we put in all our savings as a first loss into the bond. Even then, when we went out in the market, I couldn't go and sell it. So it really was the fact that I had to have men who, when you have an image of especially a white man walking in saying, hey, you know, this is a great instrument, you know, you really should be putting money in it. All of a sudden, for investors, that's actually comfort, and they bought the bond. My feminist side took a bullet to actually win the war for women in the last mile.
Oh my God, I still can't believe that this is happening. I believe in the US.
Yeah, and then in Asia. In
Asia
as well. Wow. Oh, absolutely, absolutely. It's actually, matter of fact, even more difficult in Asia.
In the last 14 years, Doreen has raised nearly $300 million of capital across 50 different countries for women enterprises. And that's happened through her initiative Impact Investment Exchange, or IIX. More than half of this investment has come from a series of women livelihood bonds. And now she's on the path to raise over $10 billion for women-run startups by 2030 with a new product called Orange Bonds. So what impact do these financial products actually have? We spoke to a few businesses who are working with Impact Investment Exchange in different areas.
Hi, my name is Afsha Abbas, and I am the CEO of Usha, a direct-to-consumer brand of artisanal footwear. They're made in South Asia, particularly in Pakistan. Before us, they were really struggling in the local markets to make a living. Some of the problems they were experiencing were they were not paid well enough for their craft, but these artisans were competing with mass-produced products that were cheaply priced. What we brought to them was a high-end consumer. IIX is an investor in Fuchsia Shoes. They have been on board in supporting our mission in elevating craft in South Asia.
I am Farha Muzarna. I am working at ADEX Australia International Limited as head of finance and accounts. IIX has been one of the partners from the very beginning. ADEX first product was biodigester. Our second product, known as eCook, that is electromagnetic induction cooker. Most of the women actually spend a large amount of time in the kitchen, especially for collecting or sourcing the cooking method. Most are actually dependent on wood or coal. So most of their time actually they spend on sourcing those elements.
My name is Rui Singh, and I'm co-founder of Blue 7, which is a single-family office impact first investor. One of the main things for us in our work in Blue 7 is to make sure that the investment dollar goes to direct beneficiaries. If you can create success by supporting entrepreneurs, they would employ people, have supply chains, have customers, and they mentor and inspire a whole new generation.
However, with the global slowdown and a shrinking pool of easy money, I asked Doreen if investors will bet on these types of financial products.
The reason investors are coming in, so if you look at it, even during pandemic, we actually didn't have any